Fantastic. To those of you who are online, I'm super new to Riverside, but I can see that there's a little chat here, which is wonderful. If you're willing to chat in the little chat box, that would be fantastic. The first thing I want to see a reaction or a little emoji or something like that in the chat is when it comes to this line. I wish I'd said something. How many of you have come away from an environment, an opportunity to speak up, a challenge, a speaking challenge, and you thought, oh, I wish I'd said something? And I'm putting my hand up because I've definitely been in this environment. Let's see. Absolutely. Yeah, we've got some. Yeah, yeah, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for putting those in the chat. And now I'd love you to just pop one word in the chat that reflects how you feel, where you're at right now when it comes to those speaking challenges, those moments where people say, tell me about yourself, or let's just start with an icebreaker, or anyone got anything interesting to say about themselves? Yeah, cringe. I love that. Yeah, I feel like that. And I've done a lot of this sort of world. It's really interesting. Hate it, someone else has said. And if you find that this is a little bit tricky to kind of put into one word or a couple of words, give me a rating out of 10. So 10 is absolutely super confident. 0 is, I hate this. And I'm actually thinking that some of the people that are on here will say 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 when it comes to those sorts of environments. Brilliant. We've got some same freeze, cringe, overthinking. Oh, thank you for being so honest, everyone. 3, 4, my mind goes blank. Absolutely. 3, 4, brilliant. Well, hopefully by the end of this, we'll have that sort of 1% difference, that 1% change, so that the next time this opportunity comes up, you feel like, okay, I've got some tools under my belt. So that's my aim for the rest of this workshop or this session. Now, the first thing that I want you to realize when it comes to all of this stuff is you're not on your own. And you can see that from the chat right now. But being someone who steps outside of the tribe or the community, puts themselves on show and feels cringe, freezing, overthinking, that stressful fight or flight reaction, that's totally normal. And it's actually for a really good reason. And from a primal point of view, that would have been a really stressful moment, because if we were kind of ostracized from the crowd and we were demonstrating that we didn't have any value to share, or we weren't beneficial in some way, we're an extra kind of useless mouth to feed. And so we would be kind of shunned from the group. So somewhere deep within us, there is this need, this desperation to feel accepted. And I just want you to put you at ease, basically, and say that that is totally normal and that there are some things that we can do about it. Now, the other thing that I want us to think about as we're moving through this session is it's actually not so much about the information that you give. So what I've seen over the years of working with clients is that people get hung up on the content. And actually, often it's way more about this. It's about the feeling you leave behind. So I want you to think of yourself as a sort of pebble. And every time you're going into those interactions, you're being thrown into a pond. And the reverberations the ripple effect that you leave is actually the most important thing. So rather than feeling I've got to be intelligent, I've got to be inspiring, I've got to be super articulate with my content, it's actually about that feeling that you leave behind. So we're going to focus on that a little bit today. So first things first, I'll introduce myself. My name's Charlotte Lewis, and I help people to speak with confidence. And I've been really lucky to do these things with brilliant companies and organizations, with people who have been that pebble. They've thrown themselves into these environments and they really have made those ripple effects. With these organizations that you see here, they've done incredible things like speak to thousands of people, bare their soul when it comes to their content, or maybe just wear a lot of hats or juggle a lot of things at once, having the inner earpiece and still being able to interview someone whilst, the producer's talking. But also for some people, they might not work with these huge organizations. They might be just thinking about gaining a little bit of confidence as they're moving through peri and menopause, or they're thinking about returning back to work, or they're thinking about, actually, I've always been the guy who sort of dulled my shine in the hope that I won't be ostracized if I shine too big. So there's a lot of things that are really connected with the voice. And identity, and I love exploring it all. So who am I to talk about this stuff? Well, first of all, I've got a master's in theatre directing, so I went to Birkbeck in London, and it was a little bit tough because I was the only female in my cohort, and I didn't quite realise how competitive it was. So it was me and 7 guys, and they'd all been to Eton, Warwick, Bristol, RADA. They were incredibly capable, intelligent people. But throughout that course, we had a lot of practical exploration, and I went on to do theatre directing internationally. I've done that for about 10 years now around the world. So I like to think that I can know what it is that engages an audience. And I've also studied to be a yoga and pranayama teacher across the years. So our voice isn't just something that we drag around with us. It is this reflection of this inner world. It's this bridge between the inner and outer world. And of course, that relies on our whole body experience, on our breath, and the state of being that we're in. And so ignoring those cues can really impact the voice. And so that's what took me into that world. But most importantly, out of all of this, I've been there. This is possibly the most important part of my experience, is that I have not been someone that was just born confident. Sure, I was a loud and expressive child, but when I went to that master's in theatre directing, when I was pursuing something that I really, really loved, I found that the stakes were really high, and suddenly I felt like, oh my goodness, my voice is so important. I have to get everything right. And I began to shrink my world of experience because the stakes were just so high. So I know from experience what it feels like to shrink away from the world because of your voice, but also to feel like, oh, this is just who I am now and there's no way out. And hopefully today I can demonstrate that, I love doing workshops like this and taking to stages now, that there is a way out on the other side. If you are feeling like, gosh, this is going to be me forever, I just want to provide some comfort that it won't be like that forever. So first things first, what does confidence mean? Let's put this in the chat. What do you think being confident is? Or even, where does this word come from? What does it mean to us? Just pop that in there when you have a little bit of an idea, because it's kind of ethereal, right? A lot of the time we think confidence is just this quality we're born with and all of these sorts of things. Yeah, I love this. Trusting yourself. Interesting. Brilliant. Yeah. Trusting you'll say the right thing. Relaxed. Wonderful. These are great. Walking into a room full of people without freaking out. Yes. Wow. Great. Well done, gang. Keep popping them in there if the ideas come to you. I know that we've got some reflective thinkers as well. Maybe this is something that you kind of take it away and think, what does confidence mean to me? But those are really good suggestions. And actually, those of you who said trust, you're absolutely right. It comes from confidentia, which comes from confidere, have full trust. Now, often when we think of confident people, we think about the acts that they do, the external, they've been on stages, they have talked to thousands, they're confident with a mic in their hand, or they've done XYZ. Even looking at some of the insignias that I had on early on in the presentation, you might think of that tick list of what they've achieved, but actually it's a quality of trust, and thinking, I have full trust, feeling that you have full trust in yourself. And so the first thing we're going to do is just jot down, and you can do this in the chat if you desire, but we can also just do this with a pen and paper. We're just going to take a moment to think about 3 words or things or qualities that you think, or values, that you have full trust that you have. So they might be something like, I'm committed, or charismatic, or hardworking. What are some of those words that you have full trust that they could describe you in some way? And if you do feel confident enough to put them in the chat, fantastic. If someone just written believing in you, yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Brilliant. Just take a few moments to think, what are some of those qualities that without a shadow of a doubt, I trust that they are part of me? And this is a really personal thing, so if you don't want to put it in the chat, that's absolutely fine. But I am going to give you just a few moments longer to think about those because I think it's a difficult question. Compassion, wonderful. And passion is an interesting word. A lot of people use that as a descriptor of themselves. I'm really passionate about what I do. Passion comes from the root word patio, which means to suffer or be inflicted by. It's something that we kind of can't help but be a part of us. So that's a really nice alternative word to think of. What am I passionate about? What is the thing that I could never be separate from? Honesty, wonderful. Well done for popping these in. That's really generous. Yeah, great. And a really nice alternative exercise that you can do when it comes to this, if you're struggling with this, is to message someone that you really trust and say, what if I was to give you this exercise of 3 words that you think really represent who I am or my values or the qualities, what 3 words would you use? And you'll be really shocked by what comes back. Now, an adjustment to that exercise that you can do, which is a really lovely one to try. If you are someone that says, I hate the sound of my own voice, which we often all do, right? Oh, I can't listen back on to myself on a recording or things like that. Message that person and say, what do you like about my voice? And how does my voice make you feel? Now, this comes from a vocal coach called Nick Redman, and you'll be stunned by the results that come back for that because you just don't know how you're coming across. We've got a really warped impression of that. Yeah, I've never been able to do those exercises without being crippled with anxiety and overthinking, of being deemed self-centered, a bit weak. Wow, yeah, okay. When it comes to this exercise of values, you mean willing, I care about work, people, others, I'm honest, fantastic, vulnerability. Asking friends, okay, great. So I think you can always put the blame a little bit on someone's asked me to do this. So I was just in this course and I'd love to know your best impression of, or your best attempt of this exercise. You'll be surprised. If there are friends around you that go, why are you asking that? I have to say, that's not someone that you can necessarily trust with this. Send them a pre-message and say, I feel a bit vulnerable about doing an exercise like this, but I've heard that it's really worth my time. A family member is great as well, or a partner, someone that maybe has known you a long, long time. Reach out and address the elephant in the room. This feels really vulnerable to do. Everyone that I've done this exercise with has felt really vulnerable, but they have been shocked by what's come back to them. And although there might be a little bit of, this is a bit of an unusual text message, they come back with some really profound answers. So these are wonderful. These willing, care about work, people, that's wonderful. If you've got that as your values that you describe yourself with, absolutely should be reflected back at you. Compassion, vulnerability, absolute superpowers there. So that's wonderful. This is a really nice exercise to just start to think about the content of what we want to say when people ask us, tell us about yourself. So we could even evolve this. So if someone said, tell us about yourself, and you've been so generous doing that with me, tell us about yourself. Have a little think now, and you don't have to put this in the chat, but you could. Have a little think about actually how you could use one of those values or qualities to be a part of one of those sentences. And actually, as I've grown in confidence, this has become so much easier to say things like, well, I think I'm a really heart-centered person. I'm pretty vulnerable. I like having very raw and deep conversations. I think I bypass small talk a lot of the time because I just really love knowing who people are. Like, imagine if you said that rather than, hey, I'm so and so and I do this, and we do the kind of normal thing because we don't want to be seen as different. Now there's another way of evolving this, of course, which we can do via our elevator pitch, if you like. Now, it's not quite a pitch, it's just the idea that if we were stuck in an elevator going between floors, we'd have a limited amount of time to talk to people and to tell them a bit about ourselves. And imagine if you were in an elevator with someone that you really wanted to know or make a relationship with. And a really simple way of doing that is via 3 parts. So we can jot this down again in the chat or just jot this down on a piece of paper. But I want you to think about the people that you help. Who are the people that you help very specifically? Now, I used to go really broad with this sort of stuff, oh, I help people who struggle with speaking. That's really broad. So I might have 10 of these elevator pitches, depending on who I'm with. Okay. So if you're starting to feel a bit of overwhelm, just select one. Okay. This is one group of people that I help. So I might say entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs who are now becoming less involved with the company, charity leaders. I'm thinking about all the clients that are in my head, influencers, presenters. I'm getting really specific. So just jot down who you help or who you support and give yourself that challenge of being really specific. I help people between the age of, or I help athletes who are. I'm trying to hold my tongue back from doing the whole exercise in one, but I help who's the most specific? 18-year-olds. I help new mums. I help grandparents. I help tech bros. Make them really nice and specific. Once you've got them, what do you help them with? So if I've chosen that, I help charity leaders with creating compelling talks. Yeah, lovely. I help founders of small businesses, typically in their 40s and 50s. That's great because I've immediately got, is this me or how can I help? Because that's the way we're wired, right? That's what's so great about an elevator pitch and what we were thinking about information. We're kind of curating that information to be like, okay, how can it be primed for my audience so that they listen to this and they think, I can help that person or I know someone like that. I'm already thinking about all the people that I know who are typically in their 40s and 50s who are founders of small businesses. So great, that's really primed. Excellent. Fingers crossed you've got what you help them with. And again, that's something that's very tangible, something that is like with their calendars, paid speaking opportunity, with public sport events, something really nice and tangible. And this last bit is really cool, really useful, so that they can. What's the kind of transitive moment that you're a part of? Before they met you, they didn't have this ability to do something. Now that they've met you, they can. So if I'm using my charity leaders example, I might say something like, I help charity leaders with creating compelling talks so that they can raise as much money as they possibly can for their charities by doing corporate talks, speaking engagements. That's one client that I've got very much in mind. I help athletes with their imposter syndrome so that they can show up online with feelings of ease and excitement. So if you've got any more suggestions of these, might be in there. Brilliant. I help HNWI families to save time by letting me do admin on their behalf. Oh my gosh, this sounds fantastic. Manage their houses and organize their lives. Fantastic. With their back office, also Claire's was I help founders of small businesses typically in their 40s and 50s with their back office function and admin support so that they can focus on revenue generating activities. Fantastic. These are great sentences. I help C-suite executives in their financial service industry, usually around the age of 40 to 60. Fantastic. And then we've got that with and so, right? So there you're starting to see that content evolve, and it's just with a little bit of steering. So what tends to happen when we mind blank, we are asked to spontaneously be put on the spot, is that we kind of think of everything we could ever say, and it becomes very overwhelming. So with a structure like this, we think, well, I've got a little bit of, imagine that it's kind of all of this traffic is looking at going from A to B. Well, I've got a bit of a road now and I've got a bit of an order. So we've got a little bit of restriction so that we know only one car can go in one lane at one time, unless you're somewhere like Mumbai, of course. And then it's a free for all and it's beautifully chaotic. Fantastic. So hopefully you have that sentence now. The next thing that we're going to do is I want you to stand up, and you don't have to pop your cameras on. This is absolutely, I'll lead through. I've done this a million times so that you don't have to present doing this. You're going to stand up and you're going to close your eyes. And I want you to think about someone that has just asked you that question. Tell me about yourself. Or you're online, maybe you're sat at your computer desk and you're thinking, my goodness, we're going around the room and now I'll have to speak next. And you feel that familiar adrenaline coursing. Now, we are in the rehearsal phase, which means that actually we're probably not feeling adrenaline. But if I said to you, right, we're all going to stick our cameras on and we're all going to introduce ourselves now verbally, you might feel that. So I want to get a little bit of stress in the body. Now, my experience as a yoga teacher was really brilliant because I learned that yoga is a controlled stress environment. So we put ourselves in these wobbly positions and we purposefully take ourselves towards stress so that we can learn how to deal with stress. It's not so that we can learn, well, it kind of is how to stand on one leg. That's great for our body, but it's also to learn how to deal with these situations, to deal with that little bit of moment of stress. So we're going to welcome in that stress right now, closing your eyes, imagining that you're in that environment, seeing other people's faces, perhaps in the little squares on the screen, or walking into an environment where there's lots of people in suits and they look very professional and all that sort of world. And we might feel that little bit of stirring in our gut. And I want us to say that sentence, imagining that we've gone around the room. So you can flutter your eyes open if you need to read this, that's absolutely fine. But you're going to say your sentence out loud, imagining that you're presenting it to an environment. So I help charity leaders with creating compelling speeches so that they can gain as much money as they possibly can for their charities during corporate talks. Okay, now we're going to add one thing to just see, does this make a difference? Okay, I want you to stand with your feet hip width distance apart, so that's roughly 2 fists. The other way that you can gauge this is by taking one foot and just swiveling it and seeing if it touches the other foot. If it does, then that's generally hip width distance. Soften your knees. And now the reason why I've got a peach on the screen is because I want you to clench your bottom and see what this does. So soft knees, clench your bottom, relax your shoulders. See what that does to your center of gravity. And you might even be able to see this on the screen almost immediately. I've gone from here to here. You can even just see this slight lowering of the center of gravity. I can feel this energy pulling down towards my bottom and around my gut. Now, what happens here when we are in that fight or flight moment, when we are feeling the adrenaline coursing through our veins, it rushes to our extremities, our hands and our feet, to fight or to run away. When we are clenching in the bottom, we guide the adrenaline to somewhere else, somewhere useful. Now, where else do we guide strength or activation towards the bottom? It's things like weightlifting, isn't it? It's to have that feeling of strength in our legs, a strong foundation, so that we can lift something heavy. So that's what we're engaging there. Now, I want you to think about doing that sentence again, saying that sentence again, I help with, so that they can. And however you've molded that is brilliant. With your feet hip width distance apart, clench your bottom, and now deliver that across the side of the room or towards the computer. Take a few moments to do that now. Now, hopefully, you noticed a difference, even if it was 1%. And I'm going to demonstrate it for you now to see if it makes a difference with me, okay? I help charity leaders with crafting compelling speeches so that they can go into corporate talks and earn as much money as possible for their charity. There was no ums, filler words. I didn't feel wobbly. I felt excited to convey that speech. Now, granted, I've done this a lot of times. It does take a little bit of practice, but it's such a lovely little fail-safe to think, I've just got to clench my butt. This can work if you're sat down, if you're in a room full of people. They will never be able to see you do it. They'll never be able to see you do it. I'm doing it right now. So I can highly recommend this. If you felt 1% change, that's fantastic, okay? But just remember to keep it peachy. Did anyone want to put in the chat if they experienced anything? You might have felt just this like destabilizing in the posture for now. And that might just need a few tweaks. But maybe you felt that little bit of groundedness that you need to deliver your elevator pitch with a little bit more smoothness. I'll let you ponder that in the chat. The last thing that I want to give you is 2 sentences. You are credible, full stop. Now, I did a workshop a couple of months ago called I think it was called something like the wonderful power or the wonderful pleasure of saying no. And a large portion of this workshop was looking at the most wonderful punctuation, one of my favorite punctuation marks, which is a full stop. When it comes to credibility, we hinder it so often by things like run-on sentences, ellipses. So that's a full stop, that's 3 full stops, which kind of nears towards an end rather than stopping where we are. We do things like upspeak, and we use lots of commas, which we kind of think of as the kick up the arse of thought. A full stop is really credible, not only because it stops us from doing all of those things, filler words, etc., but it gives us time to think, what do I want to say next? How do I want to enjoy this moment of pause, this stop? So the way that we're going to work with the full stop is by embodying it, okay? And again, you can do this in your space, no one can see you. But I want you to take that elevator pitch and pop the full stops where you think they need to be. So it might be, I help charity leaders. That might be a comma. Who knows? I help charity leaders craft compelling speeches. Full stop. This is because I love it when they walk into corporate spaces, do a talk, and they earn more money. It could be something like that, okay? However, wherever you want to put your full stop, place that now. If you ever have a script written down and you want to see this more visually, you can always just put a little slash next to the full stop. You can even do this with a book, so you can read things aloud and just pop a little slash in the book whenever you get to a full stop and start practicing it that way. But how we're going to do it today is wherever you've picked that full stop to go, you're going to walk and deliver your words. So do an example. I help charity leaders. And I might choose my full stop to be here. So I'm going to stop. I help charity leaders. I'm going to let the air drop out and take a breath in before I go on to the next sentence. I help charity leaders craft compelling talks. I help charity leaders craft compelling talks. Yeah, so that feels right. So I'm starting to embody so that they can earn lots of money for their charities, talking at corporate events. So I'm learning how to embody. What does the full stop feel like in my body? How can I bring my body to a full stop? When my body stops, my breath drops. Just let out, release anything that's left. And then I give myself a moment before moving on to the next thing. Here is where we learn that 9 times out of 10, we are trying to run fast. We're in such an immediate world where we're desperate to get every point through, and we're so worried about being interrupted that we don't take our time. But actually, this is the marker of credibility, to take our time, to say less, to have more impactful sentences. So that's another way of using something, embodying something, to give you that real ripple effect, that resonance that's desired, rather than thinking, oh, gosh, I've messed up the content and I need to verbally work out what it is here. I can just embody the full stop. Of course, we're not going to do this in real life. We're not going to walk up to someone says, tell me about yourself, and you say, I help charity leaders with their compelling talks. We're not going to do that sort of thing. But when it comes to rehearsing, when it comes to investing in some rehearsal of the voice, that's where we can use it. Because once we embody it, we're less afraid of it. It's like that yoga, right? We go to the yoga class, not just so that we can order a coffee standing on one leg in the real world, but so that we can take the stress. Now, people get stressed with silence, where they're thinking, gosh, everyone's going around the room and they're introducing themselves and I'm next. We're so terrified of not being quick enough. Whereas actually, if we embody the full stop, we don't worry about that anymore. The pause is never as long as you think. The full stop can be made friends with. So that's a really nice exercise to up your credibility. Let's have a little look. Yes, I confirm I felt 1% better and a bit more grounded. I actually surprised myself that I spoke as loud as I did. So this is on the peachy bottom exercise. And I'm chuffed that you said that, because what happens is, as well, once we ground down into the bottom, I got a bit louder as well, because a lot of tension starts to drift away from the things that we hold, the areas that we hold tension in. We focus on grounding down into the bottom, soft knees, steady feet. And actually, we're not thinking about making sound. Whenever we get conscious about making sound and being louder, we tend to add tension. We're not very good at it unless we're singers or professional voice users. So these are just some of the things that I think could be really useful when you're thinking about, okay, how do I show up in these rooms? Like, I'm not going to overload you with stuff today, and we've done quite a lot here today. Thinking about our values, the way that we trust ourselves, the way that we can create something like an elevator pitch, so that if in the worst case scenario, we've got all of these pitches in our pockets. So for me, I know that I can go into any networking space and think, who do I want to talk to here? Well, it's a lot of business owners, it's a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm going to pull out that pitch from my pocket that's all about entrepreneurs and business owners. I'm going to make it relevant to them. That takes a little bit of preparation, and that's okay to have a little moment of scripting to feel a little bit prepared. We also looked at this fail-safe peachy bottom exercise, clenching your butt. It's great when you're sat down and you're trying to dilute that adrenaline that's in your hands. If you are thinking, right, I've got to present next or anything like that, you can just give those clenches as you sit. And the full stop, this is huge. This is an amazing setter verbally of boundaries. If you say things like, we don't have capacity for that, rather than, I'm not really sure we've got capacity for that, question mark, or an ellipses. Well, it's kind of up to you, I guess. It doesn't make us look credible. Whereas if we put that full stop, and we can do it with a hand, we can embody it with using the body, walking around, we can just breathe out on the after the full stop. This is going to be a game changer. This is great for those spaces where you're trying to pitch yourself as an authority or a credible figure. So I really hope that one or more of these exercises, even though we've rattled through them today, we've done quite a bit, will stick with you. So I want you to put into the chat a commitment to yourself, really, because if we are looking at evolving that trust that we have in ourselves, trust is also forged by doing the things that we say we will do, making that commitment to ourselves. If we say, oh, I'm going to really try that peach exercise, I'm going to really try to embody a full stop, and then we don't do that, we don't make the promise, we don't keep the promises that we make to ourselves. And so that's not going to foster trust. Alternatively, though, if we commit to one thing from today, or even if these few exercises have conjured a new idea of something you want to try, what's something that you'll do differently from today? Pop it in the chat and make a little bit of a commitment to yourself. It can be as small as you like. It can be something like, I'm just going to take a breath before I speak, or I'm going to write some of those pitches in my pocket. Pop them in the chat so that you have that real nice accountability. I'm not going to track you down, but it is really good to type it out loud. Type it out loud. Just declare it out loud. It's been such an active chat. Thank you ever so much. This is hard, right? This is the first promise you're going to keep to yourselves. So something there, I might make to myself, thinking about what I take away from this. As someone who does this all the time anyway, I would probably choose something like the 3 values to remind myself of, like, yeah, actually, I am really loyal, or I'm vulnerable. And so when I work with clients, that's a quality that they really enjoy. It also works as a bit of a beacon, doesn't it? When you describe yourself with a value, you become the lighthouse that beckons certain boats towards you when you're true to that value and vision. We've got some here, amazing. The full stop technique, as I always ramble out of nerves, I will definitely write down a pitch prior to interviews or networking. And the 3 values too, fantastic. So you've got a few there, Nicola, that's wonderful. I cannot stress to you how huge it is to use a full stop. I'll tell you a very quick story before we open up to things like questions. But I remember I did an Instagram post about full stop, and I said, this is how you can embody it. And it was a few years ago now. And unbeknownst to me, my mum had actually watched that video, and I threw it out into the world going, this is just something that we do with actors. And I think it's important that we learn how to use full stops in our everyday lives. And I got a call from my mum the next day, and I said, are you okay? And she was really upset. And she said, I've just used a full stop professionally for the first time in my entire life. And everyone in that meeting turned around and saw me in a totally different way. I've never been seen like that because I had a full stop and I embodied it. And I thought, whoa, if that's my own mum thinking like that, I didn't even know she was engaging with that content. And it had that massive effect. She's been working 37 years or so. That's incredible. Let's have a little. I'll promise to consider my 3 values when I let self-doubt creep in. Absolutely, because remember, it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. Those values are so important. Fantastic. That trust that you have in yourself is where confidence lies. Embody the full stop so I can breathe when speaking rather than trying to rush through what I'm saying. Absolutely. Give yourself time to just breathe. It's powerful. We also mirror each other's breathing. So when it comes to breathing, if you're frantic and you're gasping for air, everyone else will be breathing with you. And hopefully on the headphones, I've not been too breathy today. I've been quite excitedly bouncing around. Hopefully it's been comfortable to listen to. Okay, now I want you to just put one word in the chat, one word that illuminates, we did this at the beginning, how you felt about going after these challenges. How do you feel now? And listen, it might be a 1% shift. If you wrote cringe at the beginning, it might be curious or motivated or intrigued. That's a huge shift, even that. So pop your one word into the chat when you're ready. How we felt at the beginning, maybe we can compare it to how we're feeling now. Well done for you're quick off the mark in the chat. You're amazing. Reassured, that's a wonderful word. Absolutely credible. This is amazing. And we've only been on for 40 minutes, basically. Imagine how much you could gain if 40 minutes, that's a drop in the ocean, if you showed up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Patricia. Oh, wow. Amazing. I'm so pleased. Well, if you are interested in this world, what I do full time, there's actually a wait list at the moment for a course that I'm developing. So there's DIY resources that go online, but there's also opportunities to come into a space like this and have chats and check in with each other's goals, and that's called Step into the Spotlight. So if you're interested in being a part of that wait list, you can just scan the little code here. How do you make the full stop? How do you make sure the full stop doesn't come across as too direct? Really good question. If you are just embodying it and you're working with what does it feel like to have a full stop, then you don't have to do anything more than that. You don't have to push, because if you are pushing and having that extreme full stop, that's an exclamation mark. So think about a stop is purely a stop. When we stop at lights, it's not necessarily aggressive, it's just a function. So we take away the little bit of subtext from the full stop. So it's not that we're demanding, it's just that we're stopping. We're taking a breath. I don't see it that way. We let it hang in the air. Hopefully that helps. Also, I'd love to keep this conversation going because it's been really nice to have this in the chat. Sometimes the chat is completely dead. So I'm really, really glad that you've been so engaged. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, there's a newsletter that I've got as well, and there's also here a Spotify or Apple podcast that I run called Speaker SOS. So I run that with Luke Davis, who is a presenter, so he sees it from the presenting point of view, and I see it from someone who helps people do that sort of thing, and we talk about real common ailments or questions that people have, like what do I do with my hands? What if I get asked a question that I don't know the answer to? What do I do if I get really nervous? All of those sorts of SOS calls that people have. So you can listen to that wherever you get your podcasts. But what I would love is for you to connect with me online. So if you really enjoyed today and you just want to give me a tag in something, that's great, because It's really nice to see people out and about feeling like they've taken something from this session. We've got a little bit of time now for questions. Let me just see if there's any more in the chat. Oh, there we go. Is it okay to add personal information to your elevator pitch to make it more human? Absolutely. I think as well, you can always have a little think about the environment that you're in, but I always take a little bit of a risk. And I think about, okay, what makes me really passionate about my job? So I might stand up, and the personal thing that I might use is something like an example of this, which I found quite funny. I was driving up the M4 and I saw this Porsche, and it's a beautiful car. I thought, wow, what must it be like to drive that car? It's such an impressive car. Wow, beautiful. As we neared towards the car, though, I looked through the window to see the driver, and he was picking his nose. And I thought, wow, all of this beautiful car and status has just kind of been eradicated by the fact that I've just seen him picking his nose. And to me, that's a little bit like working on your content, not working on your delivery. You can have the best, most intelligent content in the world, but if your delivery falls short, then we're not going to see you as very credible. So that was a personal story. Of course, there's a bit of humor in there. I love working with humor, and you are always the decision maker of how personal you go. Who's around you? How are you going to keep everyone safe, rather than maybe expressing anything that might be activating to people? But of course, you never know. You're never going to be completely in charge of that. But yeah, personal details, absolutely. Personal stories, incidents that have happened, conversations that you were having with people. I think they're wonderful, and they absolutely make it more human. Any more questions then before we poodle off? I think, and feel free to come on the mic if anyone feels brave enough to. But that was really, yes, that's right. I've got those questions. I love that there has been this shift from cringe or mind blank to, yes, it absolutely can, to credible and reassured. That's wonderful. These are my contact details. Hopefully you can see everything there, but I'm Charlotte Speaking Confidence on Instagram, and Charlotte Lewis on LinkedIn. Speaker SOS is the podcast. And if you're on Instagram or LinkedIn, you can have a connection to my newsletter then. But that's where I'll be announcing certain offers and updates and insights into this whole world. But hopefully that's been very useful today. I'll just double check there's nothing else in the chat. Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Very useful. Oh, that's brilliant. I'm so glad that that was useful today. I hope that you are thinking about where you can adapt this, where you can take this into your own world. As I said at the very beginning, if I can do it, anyone can. It's just a practice. It's a development. It's a skill. No one's really born with confidence, and that's the end of it. Oh, thank you so much, Tori, as well. Brilliant. I'm going to end the call there, but hopefully my details will be passed on if any of you were thinking, oh gosh, I haven't got there in time. Lovely to virtually meet all of you. And yeah, if you've tried any of this out in the wild, please do let me know. Take care, everyone.